following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Hey, welcome to another edition of the Filthy FRB Show for Wednesday, July 15th. Of course, I'm FRB. I'm joined, as always, by Filthy Tom Lawler. And today we have Bellator announcer Jimmy Smith joining us live from Mohegan Sun. What's up, Jimmy?
Hey, how you guys doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Good, dude. Thanks for taking the time. You guys got a big event coming up on Friday, Bellator 140. So tell us about it. What are some of the fights that you're looking forward to on the card?
The main event, Douglas Lima versus Andrei Korshkov for the belt at 170. I mean, they're really showcasing the 170-pounders. That's what we're doing on Friday. So these are two guys that have knockout power in both hands. I mean, they're offensive. They're strikers. They hate to lose. They hate to step back. I think they're top guys, and so that's the fight I'm really looking forward to. Douglas Lima, physically, the guy's a monster. Korshkov has one of the best right hands in the business. It's going to be a great fight.
And you know, Tom, both of these guys, I think both only have one loss, and both of them are to Ben Askren.
Yeah, their only losses in Bellator are Ben Askren. Ben out-wrestled both of them. And, the only loss in Bellator for both guys.
Tom?
Yeah, not surprised at all that, Ben Askren was able to out-wrestle anybody at this point in the game. I mean, very, very clearly he's, one of the top guys. And Jimmy, you had the pleasure of watching him fight stateside quite a bit. There's also another guy on this card who's got some wrestling background, and he's a former training partner of mine, and his name's Brennan Ward, and the former 185-pound tournament champion, and he's got somebody stepping up on short notice. If I'm if I'm incorrect, or you can change that up, but I believe Roger Carroll stepping in on short notice to face the Irish bad boy, Brennan Ward.
Yeah, he is, man. That dude's excited about it. That's an animated guy. He's stepping in on, I think, 7 days' notice, and, he's seen it as, it's either an easy fight or a great opportunity. He's seen it as a great opportunity, so that dude's excited. But Brennan Ward, man, that guy's energetic playing air hockey, man. He takes everything he does seriously. He's crazy about everything he does. He's fun to be around.
Yeah. He used to, so he would spend a lot of time in Providence, Rhode Island, and obviously his hometown is very close to Mohegan Sun itself. But he was well known for riding around on a skateboard in the ghetto in a pair of Valet Tudo shorts. So that guy's a maniac.
Yeah, he's totally nuts, but physically, he's impressive, man. Real explosive. He's got a lot of physical gifts, great takedown, and that enthusiasm and energy that he kind of brings to everything, he brings to his fights too. And I think he's much better suited at 170 pounds. I think he's going to make a home there. So I can't wait to see him again at welterweight.
And Jimmy, another fight on the card, Chris Honeycutt, a very highly touted prospect, great wrestler from Edinburgh, taking on Paul Bradley, who is a standout wrestler at the University of Iowa. And I wouldn't really consider him a prospect at this point, but Honeycutt certainly is. And this is a pretty tough test for him.
Yeah, this is a big crossroads fight. I mean, Honeycutt's 6-0. This is his 7th professional fight. Paul Bradley's had 28 fights. And it's that we saw it. I mean, John Alessio fought. He fought, obviously, David Caveman Rickles last time he fought in Bellator. And it was one of those things that I talked about before that fight. I said, there comes a point when experience is a detriment. When you've had so many fights that your body's just been through the ringer, you're wrung out. There isn't anything more left in you. And I think we saw that with John Alessio a little bit against Dave Rickles. Are you over the hill at 30 fights, at 40 fights, or are you experienced and seasoned and a veteran? And Paul Bradley is going to answer that question against Honeycutt. Is it Honeycutt is just getting started, he has an experience to take me on, which is what Paul Bradley said, or is it like Chris Honeycutt said, I'm young, I'm in my prime, I haven't been through 30 fights, I have more in the tank? That's going to be the question in that fight.
And also on that card is a fighter from the UK that was supposed to be on the Invasion show, which I believe was also at Mohegan. Michael Venom Page is fighting Rudy Bears. And what's your impressions of Page? I've just heard a lot about him from fans in the UK that he has a really exciting stand-up style.
This is a guy who will moonwalk in the middle of the cage. I mean, he'll do the robot. We saw that when he took on Ricky Rainey. I mean, he's really weird. He's got a point striking style, but he can hit hard, has knockout power. Only one guy has gone the distance with him. He's one of those fighters where, when I broke it down before, I talked about fighters become spectators when they fight him. Guys with unorthodox styles, the key to a style like that, back in the boxing days, Prince Nassim Hamed, guys like that, you end up kind of staring at them. You're looking at what they're doing rather than thinking about your own offense. And that's what Michael Venom Page does. People kind of, they end up kind of staring at him because they're trying to figure him out. And then, in the meantime, they're getting their ass kicked. So it's hard to keep your offense going because his offense is so unorthodox, and that's been the key to his success.
Yeah, to me, like Michael Page kind of reminds me of another guy that's been featured on Spike TV, kind of frequently over the past year or so, and that's kind of like Raymond Daniels. They fight. Yeah. They both have styles that, like you said, it kind of mesmerizes the opponent and lets them do this very spectacular, very flashy stuff. And, they're able to use it very effectively. And, obviously, you have some experience in a wide variety of martial arts in the past, and you've been exposed to a lot of these things. But even like 10 years ago, you would never think that you'd have a guy like Michael Page fighting at a high level and being able to, pull off some of the techniques that he does.
Well, that's something we've seen in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years in MMA. I mean, with, even Conor McGregor, Lyoto Machida, guys taking kind of a karate style and bringing it back to MMA. That was something that was out of fashion in MMA, to say the least. For a lot of years, it was Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and judo, and those were the styles people had. The flashier, unorthodox kind of styles seem to be kind of weaned out in the early UFCs. Guys would come in with kung fu backgrounds and just get murdered. But what we're seeing now is guys coming in with, flashier, more unorthodox styles, but they have bases that allow them to get away with that stuff. So it's the next step in MMA, is styles coming in and out. And right now, people are doing much better with that unorthodox karate style.
I think honestly it began, or, there's kind of like a revolution when Anderson Silva landed that front kick to Vitor Belfort. It seemed like that kind of turned the pages and people kind of opened their minds up to some of the techniques that had been long forgotten.
Yeah, completely. Randy Couture, Machida, same thing. Just that front snap kick right to the jaw. We haven't seen that in years, and yet it worked, and it got people thinking about how viable these kind of styles are. Vitor Belfort, his turn when he got his own head kick knockout. It's people are seeing these kind of wheel kicks and this kind of stuff that was out for a long time coming back, and they're being successful with it,
So, Jimmy, your background, you were a wrestler. From my research, you were a wrestler in high school, and you enrolled at UCLA and somehow found yourself in a jiu-jitsu gym.
Yeah.
How did that transpire?
I was wrestling. They don't have a wrestling team at UCLA. Most Pac-12 schools don't have a wrestling team. But so they just had a wrestling club where guys would get together who had wrestled before, and we would just train together just because we missed it. And a jiu-jitsu coach came in and saw us and said, "Hey, man, you look like a good wrestler. You should come to my jiu-jitsu class. It's in this room at 7 o'clock tonight." And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And I went in there the first time, and I just used a bunch of wrestling moves on people, and I loved it. I thought it was great. So I just stayed with it. And then after I was, at UCLA, I was driving through Huntington Beach, and I saw a sign that said jiu-jitsu. And I just pulled over and signed up, and it turned out to be it was Iha Jiu-Jitsu at the time, but it turned out to be Team Punishment. So where Tito Ortiz trained and all those guys. And I ended up joining there, and that's where I got started, man.
Yeah. Jimmy, when you say that you pulled off some wrestling moves that first day, was it like the sharpshooter? Were you doing the camel clutch? What are we talking here?
Yeah, I was doing more of the half Nelson and then cranking people with it, stuff like that. I was just using amateur wrestling moves that I knew, and I just cranked them till they hurt. And because I didn't know anything. So, but it was fun, man. I was just immediately drawn to it. I had a great time with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. A school like UCLA doesn't have a wrestling team anymore. I was reading Mark Schultz's book that came out, Foxcatcher, and he wrestled at UCLA, I think only for 1 year. And I think it was maybe 82, 83, and within a couple of years it was, the program was done.
Yeah, most Pac-12 schools don't have a wrestling team. There are more that don't have it than do have it. I mean, Oregon State, they have a wrestling team. Washington doesn't have one anymore. USC doesn't have one. UCLA doesn't have one. It's just, it's one of those things on the West Coast that it was one of the first sports to go.
So the other big story about Bellator 140 is you have a new partner in the booth there, a play-by-play guy from the Boston Celtics, Sean Grandy. Yeah, now, he's got to be pretty nervous. I mean, the MMA crowd, they can be so fickle and they can be so critical. How's he holding together?
Yeah, very true. He's holding together pretty well. I mean, we did the fighter interviews this morning. That's what we do, is we interview all the fighters 2 days before. And because, that fighters don't want to talk on weigh-in day, so we do it 2 days before. And he did really well with the interviews. He did really well with the fighters. I liked all his questions. He's got the right head for the game, and he's an excellent broadcaster. It's a matter of what he knows about the nuts and bolts of the sport, and we're not going to know that really until game time. So it's one of those things where we're giving him a shot, and people keep asking all these questions about him. I said, look, we're just not going to know until it's fight time. It's like a fight. You can talk all you want about how somebody does in the gym, but until the door closes and the bell rings, you don't know. And it's the same thing with the commentary.
Yeah, Jimmy, another thing that's, kind of recently been in the news over the past few days is the big news that Emelianenko Fedor is looking to return. And obviously, the rumors are circulating that whether it's going to be the UFC, whether it'll be Bellator, whether it'll be some sort of show in Russia with M1, that he's going to get back in the cage. And I know that, out of all the promotions, obviously besides M1, who he's tied in with very closely, that it would seem that Bellator would be the front runner when it comes to having Fedor fight stateside. So, just what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, you probably can't give out too much information if you have any, but what are your thoughts on Fedor's return?
Well, I don't have any more information than anybody else. I literally don't know anything more than people have read.
Jimmy,
I would say probably, I've spent a lot of time with Fedor. I used to call fights for M1, so I spent a lot of time around the guy, and personal relationships are really important to him. And I know him and Scott Coker, they have a past. They have a personal relationship. I think that's an important factor. Whether it will be the deciding factor, I don't know, because I haven't heard anything internally in terms of us about where he might land and what the future holds for him in terms of Bellator, but his personal relationship with Scott Coker is strong. I do know that.
So, Jimmy, you got the job. You were doing M1 before you got the Bellator gig, or I think it was right after the show that you had. Jerry Millen just kind of contacted you out of nowhere, the infamous Jerry Millen?
Yeah, completely out of the blue. And sent me a Facebook message or something and said, hey, I'm Jerry Millen. I'm a former VP of Pride. I need a commentator for a show in Amsterdam next Thursday. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. And I jumped on a plane, flew to Amsterdam, met Sean, and got 5 minutes of introduction into how it worked, and I sat down and I called my first fight. So I called, I think, they had a bunch of Muay Thai fights on at the same time, so they had a bunch of Muay Thai fights, and I called those just to warm up. They didn't end up recording them, and then I ended up calling all these M1 fights, and then I worked for them for, 2 or 3 years. And then a bunch of the people from M1 went over to Bellator, and I guess they mentioned me as a commentator. They needed a new commentator, and I went right over. So that's how the chain kind of worked.
First time I heard you and Wheelock was the Affliction Day of Reckoning. I think it was January 24th, 2009, Fedor versus Arlovsky.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, that was it. I called that fight with Sean. It was one of those, I was in between M1 and Bellator, I think. I was still doing M1. I hadn't come over to Bellator yet.
Tom, you got anything for Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of stuff. I just don't know if we're going to have time to get to it, Obviously, we've touched on it a little bit, but you have a pretty good pass with the show Fight Quest. Which is really interesting to me that both that and Human Weapon never got picked up for a second season, because I thought that both of those were very, very good television. I would have thought that they could have milked those a little bit more. Out of all those different styles, everything that you trained in, the different places you went to, like how much input did you have into the actual gyms you went to? What styles are going to be trained, or was that something that they just threw at you and you had to kind of go with on the fly?
They pretty much threw it at me. I had no input in terms of the gyms where I was going. They kind of wanted to keep it a surprise, but they didn't know a lot about martial arts, the people who put the show together. So in the beginning, I think I made a list for them of just all these different styles, and they researched them and figured out what would make the best TV and what gym to go to and all that stuff. I wasn't in on that process, mostly because I don't think they wanted me to be in on that process. I think they wanted it to be a surprise where I was going and stuff like that. So they wanted me out of my comfort zone. But man, it was it was fun to do. But the number one question I get asked is, why aren't there any more Fight Quests, man? Like, what happened? The numbers weren't that good. I mean, the ratings just weren't that good. So traveling us around to different countries is expensive. I mean, transporting an entire crew, even if they're small, to another country is expensive. So you have to have the numbers to justify that. And Fight Quest never had that. Just not a lot of people watched it. A lot of people caught it later. They caught it on different channels when it was already off Discovery. So they kind of caught it too late for it to do anybody any good. But the numbers weren't there. That's the only reason any show ever gets canned, is because the numbers aren't good. And that's what happened with Fight Quest.
Oh, well, actually, that's not entirely true, because there is ad revenue and other stuff that goes into it, Jimmy.
But it did not make money. The show itself did not make money. They were incredibly disappointed with the numbers themselves. That was the killer. You can make money on revenue, you certainly can, but the ad revenue, you can only sell it if you make certain numbers, and it did not make them.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on Sean Wheelock's new position in Kansas, director of their commission?
He'll do a good job. I mean, the one thing about Sean that was probably the most impressive about Sean's ability is, man, he worked hard. He really, really would go to any length. He would interview a fighter for an hour if you let him. He was so detail-oriented. He was such a he had such a head for like minutia and details, and that was his thing. So he's going to do a fantastic job with the commission, because nothing's going to get past that guy when it comes to MMA.
I just thought it was a kind of an interesting switch, because it's kind of like, you're going from in front of the camera to being an administrator, which it's not, I don't think it's all that much fun. You got to deal with drug tests and, assigning referees and all this. I mean, it just seems like such a different type position.
Yeah, totally different. I didn't know. I mean, I know he was close to the commission. I know he knew people on the commission. I didn't know about him going to the commission until you guys did, until somebody tweeted about it, and I read about it. I didn't know anything about it. So the whole switch and why he would move and all these things, I'm not aware of them either. Certainly not a job that would appeal to me. I used to be a teacher, and I'm really glad I don't teach anymore. So, yeah, but I didn't find out anything more than anybody else. So it surprised me as well.
Jimmy, what teacher, what subject did you teach?
I taught 7th grade algebra.
Ooh. Yeah, I taught...
They're horrible at that age.
I taught 10th and 11th grade world and U.S. history before...
I got my degree in history, man, from UCLA. That's what I studied.
Yeah. I know, it's rough life. People out there don't get it.
It is, man. Teaching bureaucracy is terrible.
Yeah.
So, Tom, do you want to go back to teaching ever?
No. Never. I'd rather, I'd rather be the guy that Sean Wheelock hires to go collect the piss.
You'd rather be the pee cup holder guy. I understand that.
Yeah. A lot less stressful at the end of the day, and it's probably about the same pay, if not better.
Yeah, much more rewarding, I think.
Yeah. Plus, if you get lucky and the UFC fights in Kansas and Mashida's on the card, you could have quite a bounty.
Yeah, that would be an experience. That certainly would be.
So, Jimmy, you probably answer this question a lot, but what's the difference working for Scott Coker versus working for Bjorn Rebney, who, when he was in the sport, was one of the more controversial characters in the sport? I mean, it was at times very difficult to find anyone who said, yeah, I like him.
Did you find anybody?
No, I didn't.
Had to think about it for a second. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Scott is Scott's mindset in terms of doing the job is he will look at feature pieces that we have for a fighter, look at him and go, hey, great job, keep doing what you're doing. He'll look at a broadcast and go, hey, great, I think you guys make great TV, keep going for it. I'm going to make fighter contracts. I'm going to try and get bigger venues. I'll do my job, you do your job. That's his attitude. Scott Coker's attitude is, as long as you're doing your job, we are great, keep going. And it's a much more of a hands-off kind of style, so people feel just much more relaxed and much more able to do their jobs and focus on what they need to do, rather than getting 3 pages of notes back about every little detail of something they do. So the attitude has just been a lot more relaxed out here at Bellator since he's left.
Jimmy, I mean, I don't know if you watch professional wrestling or did when you were younger. Tom and I are still into it, and the guy who's the complete opposite of what you described is Vince McMahon. It's fear and intimidation, yelling in the guy's ears, while they're trying to call the match. And so basically you don't have anybody trying to basically guide you if you're trying to build up a contender, or because even though this is real fighting, there's a degree of storytelling involved.
Well, for me personally?
Yeah.
For me, I was basically left alone. I mean, all the horror stories about Bjorn, generally, they don't have anything to do with me, generally speaking. I mean, I have a couple, but they weren't directed at me. It's what I've seen with other people. Personally, he never said, oh, say this about this guy, we're trying to build him up as this, be sure to, I would get I'd do an entire show opener, entire show during rehearsal and get one thing. I mean, hey, he's a wrestler, both guys are wrestlers, so try and mention the other guy striking. Okay. Now, I would literally maybe get one note per rehearsal, like that, something really simple. So it's not like there's somebody in my ear saying, build up this guy, or talk about this, or talk about that. No one bugs me. So the storytelling a lot of times is the feature pieces they make, the interviews they do, how they put them together, the package about the fighter is really more the storytelling. I'm reactive to what's happening as a fighter is fighting. So I'm very lucky. I generally don't have anyone over my shoulder. I don't have anyone telling me what to do. Everything I say is it comes from my head. I'm very lucky.
I got two things, Brian, here. One, right, is that I'm pretty sure Rampage liked Bjorn Rebney.
I'm sure he did. Yeah, I'm sure he did. Uh-huh.
Yeah, because that was one of his complaints, right? That he had made these deals with Bjorn, and then when he was gone, or he may have just been using that as an out. The second one is I got a little bit of a bone to pick with you here, Jimmy. I remember a couple months ago, you guys were pumping up Dave Rickles coming out to the cage, and I believe you said that he was the best. He had the best walkouts in MMA. Is that true?
I may have said that. Yes.
I don't know. I mean, good. He's good, but.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tom, I've actually never asked you on air or even off air, what are you going to do now with this Reebok thing? Like, your hands are tied.
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm going to have to play it by ear. So, I honestly, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what they'll let me get away with. I mean, Brad Pickett walked out with a little hat on, so I know you can at least get away with that. But I've got something planned for the weigh-ins, and based on the UFC weigh-ins yesterday, it seemed like they were kind of I don't know if they forgot to bring the uniforms or what the case is with the weigh-ins, but they didn't have everybody in the fight kit. So perhaps you can wear whatever you want as far as it's Reebok to the weigh-ins, which that'll help me immensely. But yeah, I honestly don't really know. Another thing is, Jimmy, do you know? And I don't know if this has even ever been brought up, but whose idea is it to have the ramp at Bellator? Because I want to thank them personally.
The ramp from the walk-in ramp?
Yeah.
That's something we started doing with Scott Coker. I don't know whose specific idea it was, but yeah, that's a big Pride Strikeforce thing. They love that ramp walk-in. That was a new thing.
Yeah, who doesn't love it? I think it's
I think it's pretty cool. I like it.
Hey, Jimmy, the last thing before you go, I wanted to ask you about Dynamite coming up September 19th in San Jose, and what you think about, the half MMA, half kickboxing. I mean, I'm all for spectacles. I personally don't think these shows deliver. In theory, it sounds great. in practice, it's not as impressive. What were your first thoughts when you heard that there was right next to where you sit next to the cage, there's going to be a kickboxing ring right there?
I was confused. I was like, are we going to be sitting next to there? And then there'll be the first question I had was the logistics of ring and cage. The first question I had was am I going to sit between them? Is it there? How are you going to fit them? How's everybody going to see them? I have seen no mock-ups. They haven't sent us anything about here's how it's going to look, here's how we're setting it up, and the venue, and blah, 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 blah. I literally have no idea. I have the same questions you have about how it's going to work and the visibility and the commentary. Are they bringing in their own people? Are we commentating everything? That's a big question. I mean, I have the same questions and concerns that everybody else has in terms of the layout and the buildup of having a cage in a ring. I have no idea how that's going to work.
You got anything, Tom, in closing, rather?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy, I just want to say I think you do a fantastic job, with Bellator, and it's good to see somebody that survived through pretty much all the regimes and all the BS that's gone on backstage, and a switch over of management, and I think it's awesome, and I hope that Bellator becomes just as big as the UFC. I think it's going to be great for the fighters, and also the fans. So I hope you have a long career ahead of you.
Hey, I appreciate that, man. I hope so too, and I'll do everything I can to make it bigger and better, man.
All right, and Jimmy, what's your Twitter so people can follow you?
Jimmy Smith MMA on Twitter. Love hearing from the fans every time.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jimmy. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man. You guys have a good one.
You too.
You too.
Bye.
And now we're joined by former WCW, WWE superstar, and now a backstage agent or producer for Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, Shane Hurricane Helms. What's going on, Shane?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Great.
Good, man. Hey, thanks for taking the time. It was the glory. Tom and I are about the same age. We're 30. I'm 32. Tom's 32. And so you came along at a time, we were in high school. You were on national TV, the biggest thing. And it's just kind of cool now to be talking to guys like you, as an adult. And it brings back some great memories of high school.
Thanks, and it makes me feel old as hell.
Yeah,
but it's okay. It's okay. I'm aging in dog years. So
I meant that in a very respectful way. Not that you're getting old.
No, but I just turned 41 on Sunday, so I'm very well aware and accepting, whatever, that I'm way past my prime.
Now, Tom, before we hit record there, we were talking a little bit about Tank Abbott and 3 Count. And Tom, what were your memories of 3 Count?
Well, okay. So, I must have been maybe a junior or senior in high school. And by the way, happy birthday, Shane, even though it's a little bit belated. But, yeah, no problem. I was a big fan of 3 Count when they hit the scene. I thought it was one of the best gimmicks going, and I don't know for those of you that weren't even alive during that point. I mean, NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys and boy bands were they were top of the chain. They were all over MTV. They had girls screaming for them everywhere they go, and they kind of carried over into the 3 Count gimmick and the feud with the Young Dragons. That you guys had, towards the end of the WCW days, that also included Tank Abbott, was just phenomenal. And I as a teenager, I guess one of my favorite memories, and it's sad to say, but one of my favorite memories of wrestling around that time is seeing Tank Abbott's nipples hanging out of the 3 Count shirt as he's parading around with a gold record. So it provided me many years of entertainment.
And let me tell you, he was so excited that he did that. That was his idea. Because for people that don't know, the shirt had 3 green circles across the chest. And on Tank's shirt, the circles kind of just conveniently were on a nipple. And so he had another shirt over it. And he came running up to me and he's like, everybody called me Sugar, but, Sugar Shane Helms. So everybody would call me Sugar because wrestlers, we just can't remember real names. You got to have a nickname or we'll never know who you are. And that's how we always refer to each other by our gimmick names anyway. So you can't, Sugar, come here. And he pulls that shirt up and he's got his little nipples sticking out. And he was the happiest I ever saw him the entire time. He was so thrilled that he was going to get his nipples on TV. I don't know why.
I've heard so many stories about Tank Abbott. I mean, some of them I don't even want to say because I don't know what he would do to me, but did you travel with him too? Because I heard this guy,
no.
He could drink. Maybe not like Andre the Giant, but he liked his drinks.
Yeah, and I didn't drink at all at the time. I was a late bloomer as far as that goes. I didn't start drinking until I was like 27, and I was 25 at this time. But I know, like at the hotel bar, I walked in there one time, and he was in there choking a statue of a pelican, and he's just yelling at it, screaming at it, and he's grabbing it by the throat, choking it. And I was like, I guess not really choking it because it was a statue, but I just remember I walked in, I saw that shit, and I made a 180 and just went right back out. So I ain't going in there. He was always cool to me, but he was cool, but he was one of those guys that he could get rowdy. And so I would like tip out before things got out of hand.
Yeah. What a contrast between his debut in WCW where he pulls out a knife and threatens Big Al that he's going to slit his throat live on TV. And then, not too long after that, he's parading around with 3 count. What a big turnaround for him.
Yeah, but he was also a part. I mean, he was a fun guy. He was he wasn't a pro wrestler. In WCW, and at that time, they were just kind of throwing money out crazy, and they offered him this ridiculous contract to come do it, so he came and did it. And then, like, afterward, they wanted him to go train. He's like, why am I going to go train? Y'all going to have to pay me more to go train. Said, you pay me this knowing what I can do. If you want me to go do more work, you got to pay me more. So I kind of had to agree with him for a little bit. But it was actually, he was a part of one of my favorite, scenarios in the business because it was because of him that I got to work a little bit with the great Muta, because Muta he was going to be the Young Dragons backup, the Young Dragons, whatever. He was going to be their backup because we had Tank. And so, I got to work with Muta a little bit because of that. So it all worked out in the end.
Now, for some of the people that don't know, you're part of that wrestling scene in Cameron, North Carolina that produced Shannon Moore, the Hardy Boys, yourself. I mean, that's a lot of talent to come out of a rural part of North Carolina.
No. I always get lumped in that group. I came in way before they did, but we all kind of popped at the same time, and we met in about '96. I actually started wrestling in 1991, as far as being in the ring. Had my first match in '91, and I guess I met Matt and Jeff and Shannon about '96. I want to say maybe '95, but '96 sounds about right. And that was around the time that we all got together. We all just became friends. Like, we hit it off really quick. And we kind of were doing this little company called Omega Wrestling, which, we started since then. And out of this little independent company, there's like 11 or 13 guys got nationwide or worldwide contracts as far as in pro wrestling. It's a really crazy, crazy story, one that'll probably never be duplicated.
Yeah, Omega Wrestling. I mean, I think they're still running shows to this day, right?
Yeah, I'm the boss now of the company.
So yeah, you're running them.
But it's hard, man, because I met me, Matt, and Jeff. We're working with TNA. Jeff actually, he broke his leg doing a dirt bike stunt, a couple months back. So he's still on the road to recovery for that. Matt just became my father. I'm so busy with TNA and my stuff. It's kind of hard to run on a regular schedule. So we do about 3 or 4, events a year, but we do them big, not little small indie shows. We kind of get really big with our stuff. And about 3 or 4 a year is all I can handle right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, Shane, you were actually what I would consider the final WCW Cruiserweight champion. Once the Invasion storyline started and they brought this stuff over. It was noticeably different. It wasn't WCW anymore.
No, of course not.
Yeah, and soon thereafter, you kind of went over like a gigantic overhaul with your character and became the Hurricane. And I look at that and I see some parallels with some of the characters in the WWE in a way. I saw the other night that WWE is pushing Stardust and Neville as kind of like superhero characters. But, to me, there's only been one superhero character ever in the WWE, and that was you. So can you tell us a little bit about how much input that you had into that character as it developed?
Oh, I had complete input. Every mannerism, every slogan, saying. I designed my T-shirts. I designed the outfit. I helped design the mask. I would just it was a combination of their idea coming up to me, and they had the suggestion of it first initially because of a promo I did backstage with Steve Austin. Back then, like today on today's TV stars, their scripts are all written out for them. Back then, they didn't really do that for us. They kind of just give you bullet points. And so, I got the TV that day, and I'm doing some, skit with Steve Austin. He's like, yeah, just, Steve will talk to you, and you just react to him. I was like, all right, I guess. But of course, I'm nervous, and I don't know what I'm going to say because I don't know what he's going to say. He's Steve Austin. He can say whatever the hell he wants. I'm just hoping I don't fuck up this promo. Do I get bleeped here? I don't know what kind of show I'm on.
No, you can say whatever you want.
So I was just hoping I didn't mess up. And anyway, Steve asked me about my tattoo. I got a Green Lantern logo on my right shoulder. He asked me about the Green Lantern, and I just started, unplanned, for whatever reason, started talking about the Green Lantern like it was a real person. And at this particular time in the Green Lantern mythos, he had turned heel, and he had knocked out Superman with one punch. So that's what I said. I was like, yeah, he knocked out Superman with one punch, bam! And Steve Austin's wife started cracking up, and Steve was reacting to it, and apparently creative just loved it. And two, at that time, a lot of the WCW guys, there were just so many of us there that weren't going to make TV time. And they were just throwing out different ideas for guys, trying to get them to another level, giving them something that the audience can connect with. And so they kind of pitched that idea to me, Stephanie McMahon did, about being a superhero. And I was like, yeah, It was kind of the same thing with 3 Count. I didn't grow up wanting to be a boy band, I was a pretty decent amateur wrestler. I wanted to be Ric Flair. I didn't want to be Justin Timberlake. But just like with the 3 Count thing, I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll give it a shot. And so I said I would give the Hurricane a shot. And almost word for word, she said, do it for a couple of weeks, a few months at the most. And that was in 2001.
Now, it's pretty impressive. WWE, it's so difficult to even stay on the roster. You were there from 2001 all the way to 2010. And who knows, maybe you'd still be there today if you didn't hurt your neck. Now, I was reading about T.J. Wilson, Natty Neidhart's husband, Jim the Anvil's son-in-law. I don't know if you read about it, but he put something up on Instagram that said only 5% of the people who get the same neck injury that he had survive. 5%. And I remember your injury. How do they compare? Was yours similar or?
Probably very similar. I know I had the same doctor that had did Steve Austin, Lita, and Benoit surgery, and maybe a couple of Edge's surgery.
Dr. Maroon or Dr. Youngblood?
Youngblood.
Okay, yeah.
And I had the fastest decision he ever made. Mine, you can have a actual bone damage, or you can have the spinal cord damage. My spinal cord was about to be severed. Wow. And that might have been what CJ was getting close to, because once you sever your spinal cord, 2 things generally happen. You're either paralyzed for life or your life's over. That's generally what happened. They were afraid to even fly me to San Antonio, which is where Youngblood was based out of. They were worried that turbulence on the plane would make something happen. They were very concerned about that. But I was like, I can't drive to San Antonio either. That sounds equally as awful. So there was a lot of concern when I had mine about that, and it was a long recovery. I don't know exactly. I saw that they did TJ's in the back. I saw the scar was in the back of his neck, and I kind of thought they had got away from that. Everything I've seen recently with neck surgeries or spinal fusions, they were going through the front. So I really wanted to talk to him, and I was kind of giving him a window before I was going to talk to him, because the first couple of weeks after surgery, you just kind of trying to walk a little bit, and there's nothing you can really do. But to see what all the damage was. Mine was at 6 and 7, C6, C7 when they put that together. And I was out for about 18 months before I had a match back. And I mean, I don't think you're ever 100% back after something like that.
That's got to be scary. I mean, it's like I don't see it that much with the MMA guys. And Tom, you can probably speak to this better. Do you see really bad neck injuries? I mean, it seems like for the wrestlers, it's happening left and right.
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, there's a big stylistic difference between the two fighting styles of mixed martial arts and professional wrestling. Pro wrestling, you're taking a lot more like shock when you're taking these bumps into your spine and neck. And with MMA, I feel like it's your other joints and stuff that take more of a beating. Whereas with pro wrestling, it would definitely be your back that would be taking the brunt of the force. With MMA, a lot of times you're getting put in arm bars, you're getting twisted, you're getting turned certain ways, and that stuff just doesn't happen as much in pro wrestling as it does in mixed martial arts. So, I mean, they're both very, very dangerous, but it seems like a lot of the focus and a lot of the injuries occur with people's backs and necks in pro wrestling just because it's the constant falling.
Yeah, it's the constant whiplash. And we're doing that, on an average match. I got to imagine 15, 20 times if you're a smaller guy. I mean, right now I'm probably about 220, but I try to keep myself around 200, 205. So I was a smaller guy as far as WWE standards went. And, I mean, 15, 20 times a night, maybe 25, maybe 30, depending on the length of the match. And that's 4 or 5 nights a week. Yeah. So just after a while, like with my injury, there wasn't no real significant event. Just one day my neck decided it was done. There wasn't no conversation about it either. I went to do some push-ups to warm up before a match. And like on the 3rd or 4th push-up, I couldn't get up. I felt like I was on the flat bench, and I'd maxed out. I was trying so hard to do push up, and I couldn't get off the ground. And my right tricep it was done at that point. It wouldn't even constrict. And I don't guess they make Viagra for triceps. So.
Well, maybe they do because John Cena had that torn tricep and he was back within a month. So
he's an animal. He's one of them different species people. I made a joke on Twitter one night about how he broke his neck in segment 1 and he was back at segment 7 or something like that. Because every injury he's had, he's been back inhumanly fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, the durability of that guy. I don't know how much longer he can do it, but he doesn't seem to be showing any signs of slowing down.
If he keeps doing that garbage springboard stunner, he's not going to last too much longer.
The real stunner, I remember Austin telling me a story one time how he would do the stunner, and when he was on top, now he would do the stunner, and then there was a big after show thing every time where all the bad guys run down, and he would do the beer party, the beer bash thing. So he was doing 10 stunners a night. He said it was just tearing his back to damn pieces. He's like, it's my own finish, and I can't even do it.
Now,
imagine the way he lands on that springboard stunner is awkward anyway.
Yeah, he's gonna hurt himself. He's gonna hurt somebody else. And it just doesn't. I don't know. To me, it doesn't look that good either as a move. But oh well. I'm not the one in the ring doing it, and he's making millions, and I'm sitting at home not. So oh well.
But now, you did choke out CB Dalloway, and that was one of my favorite. That was a favorite moment for me, by the way.
Ah, thanks. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
He was one of those guys that, for whatever reason, I just didn't like him, and I can't tell you why. I think that happens in life. Like when people say that there's love at first sight, I also think there's hate and dislike at first sight. And he's one of those guys. I don't know anything about him. He might be the biggest sweetheart in the world, but he's one of those guys I just didn't like. He choked the shit out of him in a minute or something, I think.
Yeah.
It didn't take long, whatever it was.
Yeah, it was 53 seconds or something like that. But
okay.
CB is one of my favorite people that I've met in the sport. I've hung out with him afterwards. And he's a cool guy. I don't know. A lot of people just don't like him because of the look on his face.
It is. Whenever he loses that look, I hate when guys they obviously lose, but then they got that what the fuck? I didn't lose look in their face. And he's like, yes, you did. He's his is over exaggerated. Like I said, I bet he's a great guy, and if I met him, I would like him. But at that time, especially, I didn't. So Anyway, that's. I was trying to remember the fights I had seen of you, and that was the one that stuck out.
Yeah. So that was
that one in knocking the shit out of Jason McDonald was pretty entertaining.
Oh yeah, thanks.
But only because I had money on you that time. So
I'm glad I came through for you.
Appreciate it.
You know, Shane, that was the main reason. I mean, I know you could talk about your days in professional wrestling, you know, for hours and hours, but the main reason I wanted you to get on is you're a hardcore MMA fan. I mean, you know obscure fights from enhancement talent like Tom Lawler. That's pretty impressive.
Oh man, MMA is great, man. You know, MMA is what pro wrestling started out as. You know, that was the infancy of pro wrestling was. You know, back then it was wrestling and boxing. Let's put wrestling and boxing together. You know, we're talking about 100 years ago. And then the guys, you know, just slowly transitioned through, you know, several different reasons. The entertainment aspect kind of, you know, found its way in there. And is what it is. But I've always been a combat sport thing. I was a huge boxing fan coming up. I was an amateur wrestler for 7 years. I did pretty decent on a scholastic level. But pro wrestling was in my blood from the time I saw it, and that's what I wanted to do. I actually only tried amateur wrestling because the word wrestling was in there. And I went I went looking for a ring, and they had this little mat out there, and I was like, where the ropes at, you know? But I enjoyed it, and I think if MMA were around when I was younger, I would have probably gave it a shot. I don't know how successful I would have been, but I think I would have took a swing at it.
So, Tom, you did both. You did some pro wrestling training. You've done some live events, and you know I know you've told the story before. But how difficult was the decision for you to pick? You know, I think Jerry Briscoe had told you to go to training camp in Deep South in Georgia. Jody Hamilton.
Yeah. Back when Deep South was around, Jerry had sent me up there. But, you know, it's kind of actually a very similar situation to what Shane was talking about. You know, as a kid, I was a huge pro wrestling fan. I mean, there wasn't a day, you know, a Saturday night that went by that I wasn't watching WCW Saturday Night. You know, and then as all the other shows hit the television airwaves, you know, I just kept up with them from the time I would say about 6 years old until now. You know, I've been following it very, very closely. And when the UFC came around, that was another big interest of mine. So those two things have kind of ran parallel for a long time in my life. And in about 2006, that's when I decided I was going to try to give some pro wrestling a hand. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to even get as far as I did with the little amount of training and matches I had done. But it wasn't, you know, it's tough. Like, pro wrestling is an entertainment business, you know. And the mindset I had at that time, you know, just wasn't geared towards it. I had more of a competitive mindset. And to me, it kind of bothered me that your end, like the work that you put in and the result didn't necessarily equal out what you were going to get out of it, you know. Right. Because there are a lot of, you know, behind the scenes aspects in pro wrestling that do determine, you know, how far you're going to go in that business. So. Yeah, for me, I mean, making the switch over to MMA wasn't a huge problem. Now, I do honestly, that's like probably one of the biggest regrets I have in life is the fact that, you know, it's something that I've quit, you know, and there's not very many things that I could say that I flat out quit doing, but I said, you know, pro wrestling was one of them, and you know, it still kind of haunts me to this day a little bit, but you know, what are you going to do at this point?
I mean, he could be one of them crossover stars. You know, Bobby Lashley, he works for us in TNA, and then he goes to Bellator and handles a little business and comes right on back.
Yeah, the big issue for me with that is, like, to get over to Bellator, I have to lose a few fights. So it's like a catch-22, you know?
That was a nice little stinger. I like it. Good shit.
Tom actually appeared on a Ring of Honor pay-per-view last June. I think it was their return to pay-per-view with Red Dragon, right, Tom? Was that the show?
No, well, okay. So I had appeared with them at they had done a joint show with New Japan, and it was actually, I think, in May of that year. And then I was going to be on the pay-per-view doing the same thing, you know, working as a cornerman because I don't have my manager's license. So I was going to be their cornerman, but UFC basically told me not to do it. And then I look at some stuff like there's a guy I keep seeing posters put up on Twitter for there's a fighter Elias Theodoru, and it's saying he's making his pro wrestling debut this weekend up in Canada, and he's under UFC contract. And then you have Ronda Rousey making that appearance at WrestleMania. Shayna Baszler's made an appearance in Ring of Honor. So they let all these people do it, but for some reason I was told not to, which, it pisses me off. So
it's one of those things where it's better to ask for forgiveness and permission. So next time, just do it and then be like, oh, I forgot. Y'all didn't want me to do it. That's pretty much, one of the main reasons I've been successful in my career. If I wanted to do some shit, I would just go do it. And then if they didn't like it, I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, my fault.
I think Shane's right, Tom. I think, by doing the right thing and asking for permission, you actually hamstrung yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, coincidentally, there's a Ring of Honor show here on Friday evening in Las Vegas, so I may or may not be there.
Now, so Shane, tell us about
those Red Dragon guys are good as hell too. I had O'Reilly on one of the Omega shows, but I'm wanting to think that he teamed with Davey Richards there. But I actually did a show. I did a show with those two in London with O'Reilly and Bobby, and man, they are a fantastic tag team.
Yeah, they're great.
They do a nice incorporation of a lot of, MMA type stuff in their matches. And some guys try to do that, and it looks like shit. And you got to be really talented. There's been a couple, Dan Severn was, not a great pro wrestler, and he would try to do the MMA stuff, and he just kind of didn't work out as well, And when I actually saw Shamrock as a pro wrestler before I ever saw him do MMA. He went by Vince Torelli was the name that he went by. Looked just like Paul Roma, if you remember that cat.
Oh, yeah.
And he did okay, but there's a lot of guys, especially that were just like Olympic wrestlers that could not make that transition to pro wrestling, or guys that were boxers, or guys that, karate guys, or whatever the hell were doing. They just couldn't make that transition to pro wrestling. Kurt Angle is such an anomaly about how fast he picked pro wrestling up and how good he is at it. Probably in ring as good as anybody that's ever existed. Mm-hmm. It's really hard, and for guys sometimes that, their whole deal is to go out there and like choke somebody to death or knock them out as hard as they can. That transition to pro wrestling can be difficult. Because with us, a lot of competition is backstage. Without a doubt, there's a competition out to perform, and in the ring, of course, that competition part is there, but a lot of competition is backstage too. As far as presentation of character, your mic work, and all that kind of stuff. People don't really look at that as a competition because they don't focus on it, but without a doubt, that's a big part of the competition in our business.
So now as an agent or a producer for TNA, I don't think a lot of, some people who are not immersed with the pro wrestling culture, they might not know what that means. So what are you doing back there? My understanding is you're helping the guys get their character across, booking the finishes. Basically, you're there to help them look as good as possible. Is that basically what it is?
Yeah, it's like that, and it's I like to consider myself an editor, because these guys are good enough that I ain't got to go. When I do Omega, I got some young guys that I work with, and I kind of got to go with them, and I got to kind of be hands-on with them a lot. At this stage of the game with TNA or WWE, it shouldn't be that way. These guys should be ready to go out there at the top of, at the drop of a hat and perform at the highest level. And that is actually kind of what happens. I feel like if I can help anybody with little tiny things, I feel if they got big problems, that they shouldn't be there. So I'm there for the little problems. I can take anybody, I think, in my mind, I believe that, and tweak just little tiny things, and it can make, because the devil is in the details, and it's the little tiniest of things sometimes that make somebody go from a star to a superstar. And that's kind of what an agent does. It's a bit of a corner man, and sometimes the guys are in a bad mood that day, and you got to talk them off of a ledge because they're doing some shit they don't want to do. Or, everybody wants to be the world champion sometimes, or pretty much most of the time. And, maybe this week on TV, this guy's not going to be in the limelight that he wanted to. And you need an agent there sometimes to kind of talk them down so that they don't go crazy and kill somebody or something, There's a lot of different responsibilities that come with being a good agent, and I've dealt with agents most of my televised career. You didn't really deal with it too much on the indies when I came up, but all my televised career, I dealt with agents, and there's some good and some bad. So my experience with the bad agents is actually what's making me such a good agent.
Do you want to mention any names?
Not really, but I mean, it's like I can tell you like some of the great ones. Like Pat Patterson was awesome. Pat Patterson was a guy who knew like just so much about everything, and he would just say little things to you. Go out. Because I remember one time I was to develop that Hurricane character wasn't the easiest thing in the world. When I was Sugar Shane, I was a high flyer. It was a hybrid style that me and the Hardy Boys and a couple others helped. The style that pretty much is Ring of Honor now, that was what Omega was doing back in the day. We were the ones that combined that Mexican, Japanese, European, and American styles all together, trying to create something new. And that's what I was doing at Sugar Shane. So now I got a cape and a mask. I got to wrestle a little differently because that was a disconnect with that character. If I went out there and wrestled really good and was doing all these amateur takedowns and all this shit, people weren't really behind it anymore because I got a cape and a mask on. So I had to go in there and put just more character and try different stuff. And I just remember Pat, a little piece of advice. He's like, go on these house shows and, try everything in the world. What the people react to, you keep. What they don't, just don't fucking do it no more. And it's one of those things, like in my mind, I was like, if I just keep doing it, eventually they'll catch on. He's like, no, don't give them a chance to catch on. Go entertain them right now, and then they'll love you. And just, stuff like that always stuck with me. He was great. Like I know when I was a good guy Hurricane, Rick Steamboat was a great agent to have. When I was a heel as the Gregory Helms, Arn Anderson was the agent I always wanted. So, different agents are good at different things. And where I think I'm different, is that I kind of did a little bit of everything at some point. I was a heel and a mean heel when I was Gregory Helms, and I was a babyface as Hurricane. I was a character and a gimmick, and I was just a wrestler. And most agents have only done one or two of those things, whereas I've, at least dabbled in a little bit of every part as far as the presentation out in the ring.
Now, Shane, like you were saying, talking about the different styles of wrestling that you brought to the table. Now, I watch a lot of indie wrestling as well. I would say I'm familiar with it. Okay, I'm not like the biggest fan, but I see that there's like almost a shift in the style that's being wrestled now compared to a few years ago as well. Like I went to the WWN Super Show WrestleMania weekend, and I got to watch Chris Hero versus a guy named Timothy Thatcher, right? And that match looked absolutely nothing like what you would see on a WWE television show or, even on a house show or even realistically, even on a Ring of Honor show. So it looks to me like there's, a definite shift in the way that the matches are being wrestled. And there's also a shift in, having workers who aren't, it's not all about size. And having, the different styles play into it, and the crowd reacts differently to different moves now. You clearly had what I would think would be like a very, very successful career. But, do you think that perhaps if you would have been, born 10 years later, that you'd be, even regarded even higher,
Maybe so. Sometimes when you're, when you pop a little bit before your time, Jimmy Valiant was way before his time. The Boogie Woogie Man, if you guys remember him, he was a guy that in the sports entertainment era should have been a monster. Even though he did a good career, he was ahead of his time. Billy Graham was ahead of his time. If you look back at the little trunks and tights that everybody wears now, like Sugar Shane Helms was the first guy to do that. As far as us little guys, that was a look only for the big guys. So doing that style, it was kind of ahead of his time. And sometimes when something like that's ahead of its time, people don't buy it right away. And if the people in power don't buy it right away, that becomes a real significant problem. So I could definitely see that. I would have liked to seen, how I wrestled as Gregory Helms, before the neck injury. And that body of work I was doing was probably the best of my career when I was the heel cruiserweight champion. Even though I was a cruiserweight champion, I was wrestling the heavyweights pretty much every night. We would do the cruiserweight stuff to keep it alive and on the pay-per-views and stuff. But, I was wrestling The Undertaker. I was wrestling Bobby Lashley, Booker T, Matt Hardy, every heavyweight they had on SmackDown, I was in the ring with at some point. And that was probably the best body of work in my career. And it was this style that, you see in the Ring of Honor and a lot of the TNA guys, and, what you see in WWE, a lot of the guys now, it definitely was that style. But I think a part of that, why that style is getting even more popular now, though, is just like in every other sport on earth, is today's athletes are just better. When I see these guys, you talk about Neville, he's a superhero now. I might have worn the cape better, but I had nowhere near the ups that kid has. Some of the stuff that these young guys can do today is just amazing. And you hear that in every sport. Athletes are just bigger, stronger, faster than ever before, and the athleticism is just going to increase. If you see a company like PWG out in California, like those kids are bananas.
Yeah.
And if you've been keeping up with TNA, we just had a best of 5 tag team series, and it was the Wolves, which is Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards, against Austin Aries and Bobby Roode, and it's a best of 5 tag team match, and that's like the best. That's one of the best tag team series between tag teams I've seen in all my years of watching wrestling now. I'm going in the 36 years of watching it. Mm-hmm. So the athletes today are just incredible. I don't know what they're going to be able to do tomorrow. That's the exciting thing about wrestling. Wrestling evolves. It's just that's a lot of the older cats. They wish it was like it was back in the day, but it's not, and it's not going back like it was back in the day. It was a slower pace back in the day, but John Wayne movies were good too. But The Matrix changed everything. Once The Matrix came out, we're not going back to slow, just punch people in the face type movies. Every now and then you'll have something come along, but, everything changes, especially in entertainment. It's a cute saying that things go in cycles, but I think only some things go in cycles. Most everything just evolves, and evolution generally just goes in one direction.
Now, Shane, as an agent in professional wrestling, do you ever say to the guys, hey, why don't you take a look at what Conor McGregor's doing, or what Chael Sonnen used to do, or some of the guys in MMA with that, legit badass shooter type look? Do you ever tell them to try to draw inspiration from them?
I don't know if I've had the opportunity, because I've just have started as a producer there. Only been a couple months. I don't know if there's anybody I picked out of there. There's a lot of stuff that I tell guys to do in pro wrestling that MMA guys should do too, as far as in their promos and their delivery and stuff like that. Although it would be egotistical, and it's not, I think, in a lot of MMA fighters' mindset to think ahead, but you should have a post-fight speech ready. In my mind, when I did amateur wrestling, of course, there's a lot of different than MMA, but I always went out there thinking I was going to win. I don't think I ever walked on that mat thinking I was going to lose. So, I would encourage MMA guys to go out there knowing you're going to win and be prepared to win. Don't let it make you be a dick and go out there and make mistakes, of course. But you got to go out there thinking you're going to win. So have some shit to say, and if it's authentic, if people can really feel it, that's when people get behind shit. And McGregor is a shining example. He just skyrocketed as fast as anybody I've ever seen in any sport. As far as going from a relatively unknown to being the star he is. Bobby Lashley's a guy, I'm all the time getting Bobby to fire up, because Bobby's got that killer instinct in his mind. Sometimes, we need a little bit more, energy, or, not necessarily happy, but a little bit more than a reserved attitude that comes with a lot of amateur wrestling. A lot of the amateur wrestlers that I dealt with in my career, there's they hold a lot of things in and they leave it on the mat. But, when you got to fire that crowd up, sometimes that crowd needs to see you yelling, screaming, going ape shit, like Chuck Liddell used to do after he won. He'd run around, beat his damn chairs, make his little pose and all that, and that gets people going.
For sure. Hey, Tom, do you have anything in closing for Shane? Because we got these fights live from San Diego. It looks like they already started.
Yeah.
Oh, we already started?
Well, the preliminary, the fight pass.
One of the things, and this is probably, I can't imagine there's anybody else thinking this, but Shane, I'm guessing you watched that UFC 189 this weekend, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, I'm watching the Lawler and McDonald's fight, or I'm sorry, that's from my past. Actually, no, wait a minute, that is right. Yeah, Lawler. It was Lawler and Rory McDonald. Hold on. So I'm watching that fight, and when Rory gets clocked at the end and takes a seat, and I'm just thinking, like, man, like I would absolutely love it. I would so buy it if a wrestler was selling kind of like that. So you're talking about like giving them pointers, and I think more so than anything, it might just be watching how some of these guys get knocked out and how they sell some of the real pain that they're in. Could help some wrestlers. In the ring.
I definitely think so. I think it helps wrestlers sell that have actually been in fights. I think whenever we get young guys that have been in no fights and they've never been punched, and actually you see it with the bigger guys more. Because a lot of times these bigger guys, they go in bars and nobody wants to fight them. They want to fight somebody my size or somebody, time your size. And then they'll say, oh, I think I could beat this guy. And then, of course, you go time in and out or beat the shit out of them. And I think that's generally what happens. A lot of the bigger guys, man, they never get punched in the face. That was one of Brock's problems when he got in MMA. He never really been punched in the face too much because nobody's going to fight Brock Lesnar on the bar. So it's a lot of the big guys that I had to talk to. Is like, listen, when you get hit in the face, here's what your neck does. Here's what your face will turn this way, your neck will go back, and stuff like that. It definitely does help. And I think I'll tell you something that we did in WCW. We reenacted the Tank Abbott knockout, his first knockout. If you remember in UFC, and the guy went stiff arm and his arms are all up in the air and his legs were all jacked up. Well, Tank hit Jimmy Yang like that. Boom, and Jimmy Yang fell down, and his arms and legs are all up. And we got to the back, and our agent said, that just didn't look real at all. And we were like, no, that really happened. And he wouldn't believe us. It was like, we're like, no, that actually, this is exactly how it happened. And so that just popped in my mind because we were thinking about that. But I definitely agree with you, without a doubt. And the thing is, a lot of times when you see some of that realistic selling in pro wrestling, especially these days, it's because kids these days are out there making contact.
Yeah.
They're coming to the back. They're coming to the back beat up.
Shane, you brought up that Tank Abbott versus John Matua knockout, and yesterday was the 20-year anniversary of that fight.
No shit.
Yep. 20 years yesterday. So look at that.
Yep. We did. It was because me and Jimmy Yang were big MMA fans. We were great friends even back then in the Young Dragons. And I'm pretty sure it was his idea, but I was kind of like the senior person in all of those matches. I was the oldest and had been wrestling the longest, so they would kind of just ask my opinion on stuff. And I was like, yeah, do it, man. I was so excited about it. And then when he did it, of course, I loved it. And we get to the back, and we got shit on a little bit for it.
Yeah.
But I still stand by that we made the right decision.
Who was the agent then? Come on.
I think it was Terry Taylor.
Oh, Terry Taylor.
And Terry Taylor just wasn't a big MMA fan, so he just didn't know. He was a traditionalist too. It had to be old school his way, that sort of thing. With no eye. Part of my thing about being an agent too is I want to keep my head open and my eyes open to new ideas. Just because certain things work for me, that don't mean they're going to work for these guys.
You guys remember?
So I can't go in with that mentality that just because it worked for me that it'll work again, because it might not. I want these guys to be the artists. I just want to help them with the details.
I was watching the WWE Network the other night, and I think it was WCW 1990 or 91. And it was Terrence Taylor, the computerized man of the 1990s. You guys remember that gimmick?
Richard Morgan. Yeah, it was with Alexandra York. Who was
Goldust's wife, right?
Yep. And I know Ricky Morton became Richard Morton. Tommy Rich became Thomas Rich. It was a terrible, terrible gimmick, but I actually liked all the matches when he would do it, but the gimmick was just terrible.
Yeah. All right, Shane. That's Shane Helms. What's your Twitter? How do people follow you on Twitter?
It's ShaneHelms.com, because my website is ShaneHelms.com. So my Twitter is @ShaneHelms.com, COM. And Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, everything is ShaneHelms.com. I try to make it easy for everybody. Although I do get people still tweet me. They'll type in @ShaneHelms.com and ask me what my website is. I don't know why that happens, but it does.
Gotcha. Hey, really appreciate the time, Shane.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Let's do it again.
All right. Later, man. Have a good night.
Later.
You'd have a guy like Michael Page fighting at a high level and being able to, pull off some of the techniques that he does.
Well, that's something we've seen in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years in MMA. I mean, with, even Conor McGregor, Lyoto Machida, guys taking kind of a karate style and bringing it back to MMA. That was something that was out of fashion in MMA, to say the least. For a lot of years, it was Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and judo, and those were the styles people had. The flashier, unorthodox kind of styles seem to be kind of weaned out in the early UFCs. Guys would come in with kung fu backgrounds and just get murdered. But what we're seeing now is guys coming in with, flashier, more unorthodox styles, but they have bases that allow them to get away with that stuff. So it's the next step in MMA, is styles coming in and out. And right now, people are doing much better with that unorthodox karate style.
I think honestly it began, or there's kind of like a revolution when Anderson Silva landed that front kick to Vitor Belfort. It seemed like that kind of turned the pages and people kind of opened their minds up to some of the techniques that had been long forgotten.
Yeah, completely. Randy Couture, Machida, same thing. Just a front snap kick right to the jaw. We haven't seen that in years, and yet it worked, and it got people thinking about how viable these kind of styles are. Vitor Belfort, his turn when he got his own head kick knockout. It's people are seeing these kind of wheel kicks and this kind of stuff that was out for a long time coming back, and they're being successful with it.
So, Jimmy, your background, you were a wrestler. From my research, you're a wrestler in high school, and you enrolled at UCLA and somehow found yourself in a jiu-jitsu gym.
Yeah.
How did that transpire?
I was wrestling. They don't have a wrestling team at UCLA. Most Pac-12 schools don't have a wrestling team. But so they just had a wrestling club where guys would get together who had wrestled before, and we would just train together just because we missed it. And a jiu-jitsu coach came in and saw us and said, "Hey, man,
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order."
Hey, welcome to another edition of the Filthy FRB Show for Wednesday, July 15th. Of course, I'm FRB. I'm joined, as always, by Filthy Tom Lawler, and today we have Bellator announcer Jimmy Smith joining us live from Mohegan Sun. What's up, Jimmy?
Hey, how you guys doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Good, dude. Thanks for taking the time. You guys got a big event coming up on Friday, Bellator 140. So tell us about it. What are some of the fights that you're looking forward to on the card?
The main event, Douglas Lima versus Andrei Korshkov for the belt at 170. I mean, they're really showcasing the 170-pounders. That's what we're doing on Friday. So these are two guys have knockout power in both hands. I mean, they're offensive. They're strikers. They hate to lose. They hate to step back. I think they're top guys, and so that's the fight I'm really looking forward to. Douglas Lima, physically, the guy's a monster. Korshkov has one of the best right hands in the business. It's going to be a great fight.
And Tom, both of these guys, I think both only have one loss, and both of them are to Ben Askren.
Yeah, their only losses in Bellator are Ben Askren. Ben out-wrestled both of them. And, the only loss in Bellator for both guys.
Tom?
Yeah, not surprised at all that, Ben Askren was able to out-wrestle anybody at this point in the game. I mean, very, very clearly he's, one of the top guys. And, Jimmy, you had the pleasure of watching him fight stateside quite a bit. There's also another guy on this card who's got some wrestling background, and he's a former training partner of mine. And his name's Brennan Ward, and the former 185-pound tournament champion. And he's got somebody stepping up on short notice. If I'm if I'm incorrect, or you can change that up. But
look like a good wrestler should come to my jiu-jitsu class. It's in this room at 7:00 tonight. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And I went in there the first time, and I just used a bunch of wrestling moves on people, and I loved it. I thought it was great. So I just stayed with it. And then after I was, at UCLA, I was driving through Huntington Beach, and I saw a sign that said jiu-jitsu. And I just pulled over and signed up, and it turned out to be, it was EHA Jiu-Jitsu at the time, but it turned out to be Team Punishment. So where Tito Ortiz trained and all those guys. And I ended up joining there, and that's where I got started, man.
Yeah. Jimmy, when you say that you pulled off some wrestling moves that first day, was it like the sharpshooter? Were you doing the camel clutch? What are we talking here?
Yeah, I was doing more of the half Nelson and then cranking people with it, stuff like that. I was just using amateur wrestling moves that I knew, and I just cranked them till they hurt. And because I didn't know anything, but it was fun, man. I was just immediately drawn to it. I had a great time with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. A school like UCLA doesn't have a wrestling team anymore. I was reading Mark Schultz's book that came out, Foxcatcher, and he wrestled at UCLA, I think only for 1 year. And I think it was maybe 82, 83, and within a couple of years it was, the program was done. Yeah,
most Pac-12 schools don't have a wrestling team. There are more that don't have it than do have it. I mean, Oregon State, they have a wrestling team. Washington doesn't have one anymore. USC doesn't have one. UCLA doesn't have one. It's just, it's one of those things on the West Coast that it was one of the first sports to go.
So the other big story about Bellator 140 is you have a new partner in the booth there, a play-by-play guy from the Boston Celtics, Sean Grande. Yeah, he's got to be pretty nervous. I mean, the MMA crowd, they can be so fickle and they can be so critical. How's he holding together?
Yeah,
I believe Roger Carroll stepping in on short notice to face the Irish bad boy, Brennan Ward.
Yeah, he is, man. That dude's excited about it. That's an animated guy. He's stepping in on, I think, 7 days' notice, and, he's seen it as, it's either an easy fight or a great opportunity. He's seen it as a great opportunity, so that dude's excited. But Brennan Ward, man, that guy's energetic playing air hockey, man. He takes everything he does seriously. He's crazy about everything he does. He's fun to be around.
Yeah. He used to, so he would, spend a lot of time in Providence, Rhode Island, and, obviously his hometown is very close to Mohegan Sun itself, but he was well known for riding around on a skateboard in the ghetto in a pair of Valet Tudo shorts. So that guy's a maniac.
Yeah, he's totally nuts, but physically he's impressive, man. Real explosive. He's got a lot of physical gifts, great takedown, and that enthusiasm and energy that he kind of brings to everything. He brings to his fights too, and I think he's much better suited at 170 pounds. I think he's going to make a home there. So I can't wait to see him again at welterweight.
And Jimmy, another fight on the card, Chris Honeycutt, a very highly touted prospect, great wrestler from Edinburgh, taking on Paul Bradley, who is a standout wrestler at the University of Iowa. And I wouldn't really consider him a prospect at this point, but Honeycutt certainly is, and this is a pretty tough test for him.
Yeah, this is a big crossroads fight. I mean, Honeycutt's 6-0. This is his 7th professional fight. Paul Bradley's had 28 fights. It's that. We saw it. I mean, John Alessio fought. He fought, obviously, David Caveman Rickles last time he fought in Bellator, and it was one of those things that I talked about before that fight. I said there comes a point when experience is a detriment. When you've had so many fights that your body's just been through the ringer, you're wrung out. There isn't anything more left in you. And I think we saw that with John Alessio a little bit against Dave Rickles. Are you over the hill at 30 fights, at 40 fights, or are you experienced and seasoned and a veteran? And Paul Bradley is going to answer that question against Honeycutt. Is it Honeycutt is just getting started, he doesn't have the experience to take me on, which is what Paul Bradley said, or is it like Chris Honeycutt said, I'm young, I'm in my prime, I haven't been through 30 fights, I have more in the tank? That's going to be the question in that fight.
And also on that card is a fighter from the UK that was supposed to be on the Invasion show, which I believe was also at Mohegan. Michael Venom Page is fighting Rudy Bears. And what's your impressions of Page? I've just heard a lot about him from fans in the UK that he has a really exciting stand-up style.
This is a guy who will moonwalk in the middle of the cage. I mean, he'll do the robot. We saw that when he took on Ricky Rainey. I mean, he's really weird. He's got a point striking style, but he can hit hard, has knockout power. Only one guy has gone the distance with him. He's one of those fighters where, when I broke it down before, I talked about fighters become spectators when they fight him. Guys with unorthodox styles, the key to a style like that, back in the boxing days, Prince Nassim Hamed, guys like that, you end up kind of staring at them. You're looking at what they're doing rather than thinking about your own offense. And that's what Michael Venom Page does. People kind of, they end up kind of staring at him because they're trying to figure him out. And then, In the meantime, they're getting their ass kicked. So it's hard to keep your offense going because his offense is so unorthodox, and that's been the key to his success.
Yeah, to me, like Michael Page kind of reminds me of another guy that's been featured on Spike TV, kind of frequently over the past year or so, and that's kind of like Raymond Daniels. They fight. Yeah. They both have styles that, like you said, it kind of mesmerizes the opponent and lets them do this very spectacular, very flashy stuff. And, they're able to use it very effectively. And, obviously, you have some experience in a wide variety of martial arts in the past, and you've been exposed to a lot of these things. But even like 10 years ago, you would never think that